You're listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, episode number 27, 7 Tips for Helping the Thin Child Grow. I'm Jill Castle, registered dietitian, child nutrition expert, and host of the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of raising healthy kids inside and out. Today we're talking about helping thin kids gain weight and grow. Much attention is given to prevention and treatment of childhood weight problems, especially excess weight or obesity. Meanwhile, there's another group of kids at the other end of the spectrum, the thin child. The thin child can cause his parents to worry and adopt negative feeding practices along the road of trying to help him gain weight. I've talked about feeding styles before in episode number 3 of the Nourished Child, and I've also talked about why kids might not be so willing to eat in episode number 23. From toddlers to teens, the thin child who is not eating enough is just as much a concern to a parent as the child who overeats. If your child is thin and you are worried about whether she or he is getting enough nutrition, this show is for you. I'm covering 7 tips to help the thin child grow. You can find today's show notes with all the links I mentioned over at jillcastle.com/027. That's 027 for episode number 27.
Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey you, welcome back. If this is your first time here, thank you for tuning in and giving the Nourished Child Podcast a try. I take care of kids in my private practice and have done so for years, so I treat underweight kids, picky eaters, undereaters, kids with medical challenges like cerebral palsy, or those kids who are on appetite-suppressing medications, such as those with ADHD, or even athletes who aren't fueling their body for sport properly. Of course, there can be a variety of reasons why kids are underweight. In my experience, it's not just one reason. It's usually multifactorial. Kids or teens with an eating disorder may also be underweight, but this show is targeting the child who has difficulty gaining weight or staying at a healthy weight for other reasons, not an eating disorder. I pride myself on being able to get underweight kids to gain weight and grow, and I think I'm pretty good at it. I've been doing it for a number of years. Mostly what I find is that parents think they just need to get more food into their child or up the calories somehow. For example, a parent might follow their young child around with food or always have food available and at the ready in case the child wants to eat. They figure that if food is ready and available, they'll be able to help their child gain weight. Ironically, this almost never works in the long run and often doesn't work in the short run either. What gets in the way? Parents fail to build their child's appetite for eating by making food so available. Or another way a parent might go about it is to increase the portion sizes, which can work for some children, but for others it may not. Getting more food into your child is obviously part of the picture, but there are other things that can help, and that's what I want to talk about today. I have a mental checklist that I go through when helping underweight kids gain and grow that I want to share with you today. But first, a few announcements. Some of you might have joined me for my free workshop last week called Raise Your Food Parenting IQ, How to Help Your Child Eat Healthier. If you were there, thank you so much for joining in. I gave a special discount on the Kids Healthy Weight Project e-course to those who were there. Even though the discount has expired as of today, the course is still open for enrollment. What you can get in for what I think is a reasonable price, or the cost of what it would be to work with me live for a consultation and a follow-up visit, plus there's a 3-month installment pay plan that eases the punch on the wallet. If you're interested, head over to the show notes available at jillcastle.com /027, and I'll include the link so you can check it out. This past weekend, I was sorting through all of the details for the speaking engagements that are coming up this spring. And at the end of March, I will be start kicking off the speaking engagement season for me. And I think I have 8 different speaking engagements over the month of April and May. So I'll be in Massachusetts, Texas, Oklahoma, which I've never been to before, Delaware, New York, Ohio, and New Jersey. They're all professional meetings. So really, for those of you listeners who work in nutrition or medicine, I'll be around and I'd love to meet you and say hello. So if you live in any of those states and you're attending a meeting that I might be speaking at, please make sure to come up and say hello. I would love to meet you. And then last, I would love to hear your ideas for a show or your questions you want answered. You can ask them in the comments section below the show notes, or you can email me directly or post a message on the Nourished Child Facebook page. And again, if you're not on that Facebook page, please come on over and like the page. It's facebook.com/The Nourished Child. I'd be glad to answer any of your questions or comments on the podcast, and I am sure they'd be of benefit to everyone who listens. So don't be shy. Okay, then, let's get into this. 7 tips to help the thin child grow. So my tip number 1 has everything to do with your child's growth chart. And I sure hope you're familiar with that chart in your child's medical record and you know how to read it and you've looked at it and covered it, hopefully, with your pediatrician. But that's my number 1 tip. Check your child's growth chart first. So if you have a thin child, make sure you take a look at that growth chart. Children who are growing normally will track their growth predictably on their own personal growth curve. Children who are not gaining weight appropriately may demonstrate a flattening of their weight for age curve or show a decrease from their usual growth channel percentile. The growth chart is a good indicator of your child's overall nutritional status. If your child appears to be maintaining a usual and predictable pattern on the curve, you can rest assured that your child is getting adequate calories for normal growth. But if you note a deceleration or a flattening or a dive on the weight for age curve, it is time to do something about it. I am a big proponent of early action. Try the following tips or ask your doctor for a referral to a dietitian nutritionist. I recently had a client whose child had flattened out on the growth curve at around 9 months and did not get referred until 26 months of age, at which point his length had also flattened. The bottom line is, know your child's growth and take action if you see any deviations from their normal curve. Tip number 2 is all about filling in any nutrient gaps in your child's diet. So tip number 2 is consider an age-appropriate multivitamin and mineral supplement. So children who are thin may be selective or extremely picky eaters and may not be getting adequate amounts of their necessary required vitamins and minerals every day. So if your child eliminates a major food group such as dairy or fruit or vegetables or grains or protein, if he also consumes more processed foods than whole, natural foods, or is having difficulty gaining weight, a multivitamin may be a prudent addition to his or her daily diet. Of course, check this out with your pediatrician or with your nutrition professional if you have one you're working with, and make sure that that's the right way to go. But in general, what I use as a sort of filter when I'm working with these children, if I notice that they're not eating certain foods out of a food group, then I'm going to want to cover and replace those nutrients they could be missing. Tip number 3 is all about shifting your philosophy about nutrition. So when you have an underweight child, every bite counts. And that's tip 3. Adopt a new philosophy about nutrition, and that philosophy should reflect the idea that every bite your child is eating should count for nutrition. So that means every bite of food, every gulp of liquid, these can all make a contribution to your child's ability to gain weight and grow. And oftentimes, it's the accumulation of several nutritious bites that can make the difference. So, for example, some suggestions would be to make sure to add and or cook vegetables with fat, such as butter and or oils. So, steamed plain vegetables, I find them delicious, but a lot of children who are underweight will need a little bit more than just plain steamed broccoli. So saute that broccoli in oil, or melt some butter on top, or even make a cheese sauce. That will boost the calorie content in that side dish. That relates to the next suggestion. Add sauces such as cheese or hollandaise or even sour cream can help boost the overall nutrition and the calories in that food, particularly if it's a vegetable. Take fresh fruit and dip it in yogurt or fruit dips or peanut butter to boost calories. Dress your pasta. I use this recommendation a lot, and I've used it actually with my own son too, who is in a very high rate of growth right now as a 15-year-old boy. He's most definitely in his growth spurt, so I'm looking for lots of different avenues to get extra calories into him. So I double dress his pasta, and I often recommend this to my clients as well. So you boil your pasta, you rinse it. Not rinse it, but you drain it. You drain the water off, and immediately you toss it with olive oil. But then on top of that, you add butter or cheese or the marinara sauce that you're serving the pasta with. And by the way, if you go to a restaurant, oftentimes this is what they do with their pasta. They toss it in olive oil the minute they drain it, because otherwise it would all stick together. So it just adds an extra source of calories when you do that. When you're choosing dairy products, choose 2% or whole milk instead of skim or 1% fat. Even that small change in the fat content in your milk can make a difference in terms of the overall calories your child gets during the day. When you reconstitute things like soup or you prepare oatmeal, use milk instead of water. Again, you're bumping up the calories. And then last, boost any kind of baked goods that you're making, such as muffins or cookies or pancakes. Throw in an extra egg or throw in some extra dry milk powder. That will bump up the protein and the calories. Tip number 4. So I love to give this tip to all my clients. It's sort of standard approach for me. But I'm always, when I'm doing my assessment, I'm always wondering if the family is using a bedtime snack. And what I find more and more these days is that more and more families are not doing a bedtime snack for their children. And I'm not exactly sure why. Perhaps they think that's not healthy, or maybe they don't want to get into the habit of eating at night. So I totally get it. But if you have a child who is on the thin side, my tip number 4 is to add a bedtime snack. So, for example, smoothies, milkshakes, instant breakfast drinks, or just peanut butter toast or a bowl of cereal with whole milk are all great snacks that can pack extra protein and calories before sleeping. So I have more snack ideas on my snack blog, and I also have a handy snack guide, and I will include both of those links in the show notes. I have lots and lots and lots of snack ideas on my blog, and I actually have a free download in my resources tab on the blog that also gives snack ideas for kids and for toddlers and for teens. So you can certainly get some inspiration for that. To help children sort of get that leg up on weight gain, including a bedtime snack is a good idea. And remember, growth hormone is circulating at its peak when children are asleep. So having that bedtime snack They're sleeping, so the mechanisms for growing are all in full force. The engine is charged, if you will. But also, because they're sleeping, they're really not burning the calories that they're burning when they're running around during the day. So it's a fabulous time to build in some extra calories. So I hope you all will use that tip. Tip number 5 is all about your schedule and all about creating opportunities for your child to eat, but also creating space between meals and snacks so that your child can develop an appetite. So tip number 5 is stick to a schedule. So remember I mentioned earlier in the show the ineffectiveness of constantly making food available to kids? What does it do? It sabotages their appetite. Kids need space between meals and snacks to allow them to digest their food and to build up an appetite and a desire to eat. So I like to allot at least 2.5 to 3 hours between eating sessions to get regulation with an appetite in place. Older children, a bit longer. So really, when you think about the toddler, we are talking about every 2 to 2.5 hours in terms of their meal and snack schedule, eating sessions. For the older child, we're talking about every 3 to 4 hours, and for the teenager, every 4 to 5 hours, similar to what an adult would be. But for children who are underweight, constantly offering them food every hour on the hour really kills their appetite. So they never really get that cycle of hormones charging up every few hours that really helps them have an appetite to eat. And then if they have an appetite, it's logical to think that they'll also have a desire to eat. So eating meals and snacks on a consistent basis can help support the cycle of hunger and promote adequate nutrient intake. So again, as I mentioned, toddlers every 2 to 3 hours, so your breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack. For children, every 3 to 4 hours, so that would be breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner. And again, if you have a child who you're helping him or her gain weight, you would add in that evening snack. So really 3 meals and 3 snacks. And then again, for the teen, sort of the same approach. Tip number 6 is all about your child's activity. So that is to keep your child active. So tip number 6 is keep your child active. And this might sound counterintuitive. Why would you want to encourage your child to burn calories when you're working so hard to get him to consume enough? Believe it or not, activity helps build and sustain the cycle of rhythmic hunger. So kids who are active work up an appetite, and they're more likely to eat. Tip number 7, and my last tip, and you know I'm going there because I can't not go there, is all about feeding practices. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit more as the year rolls on about all the different feeding practices so you have a good idea, because these are the common mistakes parents are making at meals and at snack time, and we want to sort of build more awareness around that. But tip number 7 is don't use negative feeding practices. So what are those? For example, pleading with your child to take another bite, begging your child to eat, rewarding your child with a food treat if he eats something, or worse, threatening your child with punishment if he doesn't eat. These are all counterproductive. They are all negative feeding practice. And as I mentioned, it's the biggest mistake I see many parents making. And don't beat yourself up. It's almost universal. And I think a lot of it is just a lack of awareness amongst parents that we should all be using positive feeding interactions and practices when we're helping our children. But particularly with children who might be challenged with being underweight, and even for that matter, if they're overweight, we don't want to be using negative feeding practices. But if you feel like you're doing this unintentionally, I'm going to ask you to stop. STOP, please. And I will give you more information about the negative feeding practices in the show notes so that you can read up on that. But know that in the future, I will be featuring some shows on those different negative feeding practices. So, negative feeding practices are actions that set up a negative dynamic around food and eating for you and your child. The research is clear, they don't work, and in some cases, they make things worse. In my own personal practice, I address a parent's feeding practices every single time I interact with a family. It always comes up, we always address it, and I always try to help families use positive feeding practices. So you want to obviously provide ample opportunity and nutritious, acceptable foods on a regular schedule, and allow your child to control whether he eats and how much he or she eats. It's that division of responsibility. If you're not sure how to do this, again, head over to my blog. I'll include the links in my show notes because I've got a lot of articles on how to incorporate positive feeding and how to steer clear from negative feeding. Okay, so there you have it. My 7 tips to help the thin child gain weight and grow in the most positive ways you can. There are 2 points I want to make. Remember, some children are naturally thin and some are thin due to suboptimal or inadequate nutrition. It's important to recognize the difference and take action on the latter situation. Seek help from a registered dietitian or your pediatrician if you're concerned about your child's weight. It's not just about getting more calories into your child. Of course, this will be essential to helping your child gain weight and grow, but it's in the how you do it that matters the most. If you signed up for my course, The Kids Healthy Weight Project, it gives you the fundamental tools for positive feeding, no matter whether your child is underweight, overweight, or at a normal weight. All children need to be fed in positive ways. And so the Kids Healthy Weight Project is not about losing weight or putting kids on a diet. It's really about raising kids inside and out to be cool with food, that is, have a great relationship with food, but also to understand eating with a balance in mind, being active, sleeping well, and as the parent, feeding your child in the most positive ways you can. I hope you found this show helpful today. If so, please help the Nourished Child podcast grow. You can write a review on iTunes or subscribe to the show on iTunes, Android, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, TuneIn, and more. All the links will be in the show notes. You can share the podcast on social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Instagram, wherever you hang out. And as always, I hope that you will check out my newsletter. If you're not on it, I email out every Monday morning with nutrition tips and strategies to help you nourish your child inside and out. I also have courses, e-guides, freebies. All of them are on my website. So if you haven't headed over to jillcastle.com, please do. I think you'll find a lot of great information about childhood nutrition and feeding there for you. As always, thanks for joining me today. I'm so glad you were here. Please be sure to give the child in your life, big or small, a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.